Jeff sitting in for Jan Michelson, News Radio 1040 WHO. Well, we've got two big gun control stories going on this week. Number one has been the debate in the U.S. Senate. But also early in the week, the U.S. Supreme Court announced it's not going to hear a challenge to Connecticut's ban on what it calls assault weapons. And that is emboldening lawmakers across the nation. One here in Iowa, one in Nebraska has already said they're going to introduce an assault weapons ban in the next session of the legislature. This brings the occasion about for me to give a call to Michele Byington. She is a firearms law expert with U.S. Law Shield. Michele, welcome back to WHO in Des Moines.
Great to chat with you again.
So, Michele, I am curious, how do the U.S. Supreme Court, of course, refuse to hear the challenge to Connecticut's ban on so-called assault weapons? How do states get away with this? How do they word the law in a way that the courts are allowing these bans to stand?
So there's about half a dozen states across the country that have this quote-unquote assault rifle ban. And basically the language that we're seeing in the statutes, it says that it is unlawful to possess a semi-automatic rifle. A semi-automatic rifle is defined as a rifle having one of these components.
Okay.
They're all cosmetic components. So it's like a folding stock or a flash suppressor, or has a detachable magazine capable of holding more than 30 rounds. That's how they're defining semi-automatic rifles. And what we got to remember is these are cosmetic features. The actual deadliness of these guns is no different than a handgun.
So it seems to be, Michele, that where the argument comes down to by politicians on laws like this is no private citizens needs to be carrying things like this. This is just a military thing. Is that what you hear quite often?
Absolutely. And that rhetoric has really gained some traction, and it's very misleading to the American public. I mean, what they're doing is they're saying citizens should not have these guns because they look scary. And people are buying it, and people are believing it.
And so you probably heard me introducing you, Michele. We've already got a couple lawmakers in the Midwest that are saying, well, I'm going to now introduce a similar ban. So are you seeing this really gain momentum across the states because of this Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think the anti-gun agenda, they're really taking advantage of the tragedy down there in Orlando and using this as an opportunity for a gun grab.
Now, you're constantly, Michele, fighting for Second Amendment rights. Do you sense a changing in the tide? Chris Murphy in the U.S. Senate said, oh, yeah, the ground is shifting on this particular issue. Do you think the ground is shifting on this issue?
God, I hope not. You know, I fight every day for gun owners, and I speak to gun owners daily. And, I mean, I tell you, in my heart of hearts, I believe it's the silent majority who are against these gun control measures.
But they are coming up with ways to, I guess, get courts to rule in their favor. And what you're saying, Michele, is basically these measures, they can define guns cosmetically, and courts are upholding them?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the truth, is that it's the emotional argument that's winning in court, unfortunately, as opposed to the facts and the logical arguments. The emotion is winning out, and we saw it win out in Connecticut.
Sure.
And then you talked about the Supreme Court refusing to hear this Connecticut ban as well, which really didn't come as a surprise to me, because they decided not to hear the exact same issue that came out of a Chicago suburb back in December. And like I said earlier, there's about half a dozen states right now with this assault weapons ban. So what the Supreme Court, in my opinion, is what they're waiting on is for a real divide between the states, right? So when there is 25 and 25, when there is just this absolute divide between the states when it comes to assault weapons, that's when the Supreme Court will probably step in.
So at this point, Michele, me not being an attorney, and this is why I'm asking you this question, it seems like then that the Supreme Court is basically saying to the states, you guys talk about this right now. We're not going to step in.
That's exactly right. And what we need to remember is that when the Supreme Court refuses to hear or comment on a case, that does not set precedent,
okay,
right? So there could be the exact same case come up this time next year, and then they hear it and say, all right, let's make a decision on this. What we need to remember is that the refusal for the Supreme Court to hear this, it means nothing, basically. They're just not ready to get involved in state politics at this point.
Okay. So did any of your colleagues, Michele, and you talk about, is this one of those 4-4 things that may have affected this? Or do you think they were just more influenced by, hey, we haven't talked about this so far, we just don't want to?
I think it was a combination of those issues. Right now it is 4-4. You're exactly right. And some of the biggest, not some, the biggest gun control cases coming out of the Supreme Court were 5-4. And so this 4-4, we have got a divided court right now. And unfortunately, with Scalia's passing earlier in the year, it really just kind of tipped the scales to even for anti-gun and a pro-gun court. So I think it's a combination of all of it.
Boy, you're making that case, Michele, that who you elect next president's very important.
Absolutely important. Absolutely.
This is firearms law expert Michele Byington joining me. So it's intriguing to me, Michele, what these states are going to do. They're going to look at this law. More of them are probably going to try to pass this law. So you think there might be a tipping point where the Supreme Court says, okay, some people have this law, some people don't. Obviously, this applies to the Second Amendment. At some point, we're going to have to step in and talk about this.
Right. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point. Hopefully, citizens educate themselves and figure out that this quote-unquote assault weapons ban is not what it means. This is a cosmetic, emotional argument that people are believing. I hope that people educate themselves and vote against these things or elect senators or state officials who are pro-gun and are educated on these issues. But at the end of the day, this emotional argument touches a lot of people,
right.
And it may come to it where the Supreme Court has to step in.
So last time you and I were talking, Michele, we were talking due process. I'm sure you're following what's going on in the U.S. Senate with the, no-fly, no-buy compromise that's been announced that is trying to address the due process argument. Are you reassured that somehow maybe Senate, the Congress can compromise on this issue and still protect due process rights? Or are you still concerned over what's being touted as a compromise?
Wow. I'm still concerned.
Okay.
I really don't have a whole lot of faith right now because Senator John Cornyn did introduce kind of the compromise bill that immediately got struck down by the Democrats, which shows me that they're not. It's an all or nothing game for them at this point. So I'm not real hopeful.
Was that something that, looking at the Cornyn bill, did you say, hey, man, that was the real compromise? Why are you compromising now?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I am on the other side, right? Like, I have no compromises on this, and it's due process, period. And so when he reached out for some middle ground and it just immediately got slapped down, it was like, all right, well, that didn't work.
And Michele, you've practiced in Texas, so tell me, do you see any bills coming up that are actually pro-gun in the aftermath of this? Where are the legislators are saying, actually, the solution to this is arming ourselves?
Right. Well, yes. The answer to this is actually more guns in law-abiding citizens' hands. And here in Texas, we are a pretty gun-friendly state. That's no surprise to anybody. We actually just passed open carry that went into effect January 1st, where license holders can now openly carry their handguns. Mm-hmm. And actually, we were in the minority there. The majority of states already had open carry, some sort of lawful open carry. And we finally got up to the times and passed open carry as well come January. But with Texans, we value our guns, and our laws show that as well.
Well, and then you had to shake your head at the ruling that came out of what I think it was on the West Coast, where you really can't open carry and you can't concealed carry either. That seemed to be sort of clandestine gun control right there.
Exactly. The Ninth Circuit. Yes, I shook my head at the Ninth Circuit that day.
Well, so we're going to have to keep on top of this. And Michele, I always appreciate checking in with you. I know that you work on this issue every single day, and I appreciate your expertise. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll continue to check in with you as this gun control debate apparently is going to move to the states next.
Yeah, wonderful. I hope to talk to you soon.
All right, that's Michele Byington. She is a firearms law expert, and I wanted to get her take on this.